RoboCop might be a sci-fi classic now, but its production was anything but smooth. The production nearly blew up part of Dallas during an on-set explosion, and before cameras even rolled, no director wanted to touch the script, including Paul Verhoeven, who literally threw it in the trash. Even the title RoboCop was mocked and rejected by studio executives who feared it sounded like a cheap kids' cartoon. But from this chaotic beginning emerged one of the most iconic and influential action films of the 80s. Here are 10 secrets you never knew about how RoboCop came to life. Fact number 1. The explosion that almost killed the actors. RoboCop wasn't only dealing with costume and directorial issues, but everything became even more chaotic when there was a massive explosion. On the scene where the storefront blows apart in RoboCop, the danger was very real. In downtown Dallas, during filming of the explosion in the Deep Ellum neighborhood, the special effects team accidentally detonated a blast that was far larger than they anticipated, and the cast and crew instantly felt it. One actor, Kurtwood Smith, who plays Clarence Boddicker, had his coat catch fire during the chaos. Because they were standing so close to the explosion, he and another actor were later paid stunt pay bonuses of around $400 each. This is perhaps the only token compensation in what could have actually been a serious accident. Director Paul Verhoeven recalls watching the explosion from behind the camera and saying simply, "Wow, we survived." The roar of the blast was heard by highway drivers nearby, some of whom called the fire department, thinking that a real gas station had erupted. It was meant to be a controlled stunt, but it became a reminder of how high the stakes were during production. When you watch that scene now, you're watching actors who were genuinely terrified, and the explosion wasn't the only time this production pushed safety to its limits. Fact number 2. A toxic waste scene almost got banned. In the underbelly of the dystopian city, the film unleashes a moment so viscerally jarring, it nearly didn't survive the censors. When the henchman, Emil Antonowski, barrels his van into a massive vat of toxic waste and then stumbles out like a melting corpse, it was a meticulously calculated grotesquerie. The effect designer, Rob Bottin, created a prosthetic rig for Paul McCrane's Emil that combined saggy latex skin, internal structure molds, and real materials, including catering truck leftovers such as gravy and chicken parts to simulate a gruesome melting body effect. But the film's rating board instantly hated it, flagging the sequence as excessively graphic. Because of that, for television or other versions, the front view of Emil's melted form was re-edited, so his melting form is never seen from the front. Despite this, test audiences ranked that sequence as a highlight, and director Paul Verhoeven argued that the grotesque imagery functioned as satire and shock, rather than pure horror. The scene survived the censors, but barely, and it wasn't the only footage that almost got cut. Fact number 3. The movie was initially rated X. When RoboCop hit the hands of the Motion Picture Association of America, it didn't sail through. Its opening cut earned an X rating because of scenes deemed far too graphic and brutal for an R classification. One of the worst footages was the infamous ED-209 boardroom massacre and the prolonged execution of Alex Murphy before he became RoboCop at the hands of Clarence Boddicker's gang. Director Paul Verhoeven and his team were forced into repeated edits. These include trimming extended gore, shortening violent hits, and recutting sequences until the film finally received an R rating on its 8th or so submission. The MPAA specifically flagged the ED-209 sequence after the robot opened fire on an executive in a boardroom, and also rejected the original version of Murphy's death scene. One ratings memo described Murphy's execution as excessively prolonged and sadistic. Verhoeven later reflected, "The cuts were frustrating. but they also changed the tone. By dialing back the hyper-graphic elements, some sequences became more unsettling. Years later, an unrated director's cut was released on home video, restoring much of the footage Verhoeven was forced to trim. The X-rating battle finally ended, but the production challenges were just beginning. One of the biggest surprises? The lead role almost went to someone nobody expected. Fact number 4. Schwarzenegger almost got the main role. It's almost impossible now to imagine anyone but Peter Weller as the hulking chrome law enforcer in RoboCop. Yet for a time, the studio's first choice was none other than Arnold Schwarzenegger. Fresh off the success of The Terminator, Schwarzenegger seemed like a natural fit. But there was one problem: the suit. The bulky armor required for RoboCop simply could not accommodate Schwarzenegger's massive physique without turning the character into a walking tank. The costume designers pitched versions of the suit to fit him, and one version apparently made him look like the Michelin Man. The filmmakers weren't just worried about the visual, but they needed the audience to believe that RoboCop was still part human, part machine. A lead actor who looked invisible from the start would undermine that tension. If Schwarzenegger had gotten the role, his size would have looked ridiculous, as if he was a walking tank. They realized they needed someone with low body mass and appealing lips. Enter Peter Weller. With a leaner build, previous sci-fi genre experience, and the right kind of face for both human pain and robotic resolve, he fit the role perfectly. Weller's build allowed the suit to look mechanical, yet agile, someone you believed could still be knocked down, yet reclaim his humanity. Actually, casting Weller became a pretty smart move in RoboCop's production history, and that leads directly into the next challenge because once Weller got the role, the suit nearly destroyed him. Fact number 5. The suit was a nightmare in the making of RoboCop. The suit was a production headache in armor. When actor Peter Weller first stepped into what would become the iconic RoboCop outfit, the suit still wasn't finished. Effects legend Rob Bottin and his team were scrambling to deliver, but delays meant filming began before the costume was ready. On that first day of full suit on, Weller endured a grueling 10 to 11 hour process just to put it on. Once suited up, he discovered the worst. It was difficult for him to see through the narrow visor, the gloves made it hard to handle objects, and every movement felt locked in place. The cast members kept on laughing at all his errors. In one memorable moment, a shot of RoboCop catching a set of car keys took countless takes because the keys kept bouncing off his rubber-gloved hands. Because the suit's lower half was so bulky, Weller couldn't even fit into a police car while fully dressed. So for driving scenes, he wore only the upper half of the suit and left the robo pants behind. Because of how uncomfortable the suit was and the physical constraints on Weller, they had to make a lot of adjustments during the shoot. Weller had prepared, but the moment he put on the suit, it collapsed, and he couldn't even handle the Texas heat. But the suit troubles were only half the story. The main character, Peter Weller, took extreme measures to prepare for the role. Fact number 6. Weller prepared a lot to get his role right. Peter Weller knew that slipping into the heavy RoboCop suit meant changing how he moved, acted, and inhabited a body that was part man, part machine. To prepare, he hired mime coach Moni Yakim and spent months working with him, training to move in a fluid yet controlled way. But, as we said before, the suit wasn't what he expected. It was so restrictive and cumbersome that most of the smooth movement he had practiced was impossible. He had to relearn how to walk inside it. To make things worse, filming took place in Dallas under scorching temperatures. Inside the suit, he had to deal with heat as high as over 120 degrees Fahrenheit. To cope, industrial air conditioning tubes were sometimes used between takes. On set, Weller deliberately enforced a kind of immersion. He asked the cast and crew to address him not by his real name, but only as Murphy or Robo to maintain character separation. He also used music to help stay focused inside the helmet. During a particularly intense shootout, Weller was actually wearing headphones playing Peter Gabriel's Red Rain on a Walkman. This helped him stay focused on his character despite all the heat and the fact that he could barely see through the suit. Even worse, he had to re-record all the dialogue to sound cold and robotic, and this was done in post-production. That way, Murphy was more machine-like. The chaos in the production of RoboCop didn't end there, because even before Weller signed on, RoboCop struggled to get made, since no director wanted anything to do with it. Fact number 7. No director wanted to take it on. It's hard to imagine now, but the visionary behind RoboCop almost never directed it. Dutch filmmaker Paul Verhoeven found the script baffling at first glance. He called it American nonsense and tossed it aside after reading barely 20 pages. Meanwhile, other directors shunned the project entirely, unwilling to commit to its unorthodox blend of action, satire, and sci-fi. But you won't believe what the turning point was. Verhoeven's wife picked the discarded script off the floor, read it herself, and insisted that her husband give it another look. On that second read, Verhoeven discovered the layers buried beneath the explosions. It was a story about identity, resurrection, corporate corruption, and memory lost. Suddenly, the project clicked. Verhoeven was in, but even with a director attached, the studio had one major problem. They hated the title. Fact number 8. Executives didn't agree with the movie title. Imagine if RoboCop wasn't called RoboCop. During the early development of RoboCop, the title itself almost detailed the project. The original working title was actually Super Cop, based on the co-writer Michael Miner's earlier idea. When writers Edward Neumeier and Miner merged their concepts, the name Super Cop remained in early drafts. But even when the title shifted to RoboCop, studio executives at Orion Pictures bristled at it. They felt RoboCop sounded childish, too much like a Sunday morning cartoon or a simplified kids' action flick. The creators insisted that the name had power in its contradiction, as it shows the mix of man and machine in one word. In addition to title concerns, other structural elements were on the chopping block. Studio discussions included relocating the film's setting from Detroit, severing the link between the antagonists, and even adding a romantic subplot between Murphy and Officer Lewis. These changes were prolonged in an effort to soften the film for broader appeal, but the creative team held their ground, believing that retaining the harsh tone, corporate satire, and dystopian edge were central to the story. But despite all the doubts from the executives, the title RoboCop stuck and has since become iconic. Although the team stayed original with their ideas, there was one element of RoboCop that wasn't original at all, and the filmmakers didn't even try to hide it. Fact number 9. The movie lifted music from the Terminator. The theatrical trailer for RoboCop didn't actually feature its own score. Instead, they just took the soundtrack from the Terminator and reused it. Because the original RoboCop score by composer Basil Polidorus wasn't ready when marketing began, the production turned to music that the studio already owned. Both films were produced by the same company, so reusing the Terminator's music for RoboCop's trailer was a practical move and helped associate the new film with the success and tone of a familiar cyborg classic. This strategic reuse meant that early audiences who heard the trailer got an idea of what they should expect. They knew the movie would offer gritty sci-fi, mechanical menace, and a foreboding atmosphere. Audiences hearing the trailer had no idea they were listening to a completely different movie's music. It set the tone long before RoboCop's own score was available. When Basil Polidorus finally had his official soundtrack available, it was nothing like the track that they got from the Terminator. The final score combined orchestral and synthesized elements, and this was meant to show the combination of human and machine in RoboCop. However, even after the movie became successful, it was used in the weirdest places, like for police education and even in Korean ads. Fact number 10. The movie was used in the weirdest places. Even beyond the screen, RoboCop somehow wandered into real life, sometimes in strange ways. For instance, in the late 1980s and 1990s, the character was used in marketing in South Korea. RoboCop starred in bizarre TV commercials for frozen food and fast food brands. In one ad, he was crawling out of a TV to steal a refrigerator, and another one showed him working out his non-existent abs. It turned our favorite dystopian cyborg enforcer into a cheeky piece of pop culture advertising. Also, after a fan's suggestion to then-mayor of Detroit, Dave Bing, a group rallied behind a crowdfunding campaign to build a full-size statue of RoboCop for the city. It was a tongue-in-cheek tribute to the famous Rocky statue that was in Philadelphia. The campaign succeeded, raising over $67,000. Sculpted by artist Giorgio Gekas, the bronze statue was completed around 2021. Despite all of this, the statue's future remains uncertain. It's still in storage, awaiting a permanent public home. Even the police plan to use RoboCop as their mascot to increase public interest. RoboCop's journey from studio script to screen was wild, messy, and utterly unforgettable. From an explosion that nearly killed Kurtwood Smith, to a director who literally threw the script in the trash to a suit that required 11 hours just to put on, the movie ended up making about 3 times its original investment. The film cost $13 million and made over $53 million worldwide. Which secret shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments. If you stuck to the end of this video, then you're definitely interested in what happens when making movies. To learn more about how the most famous films were produced and all the secrets that happen behind the scenes, subscribe to our channel and leave a like. And remember, dead or alive, you're coming with me.